Greetings and welcome in to the Tub Fantasy Network. My name is Cross Bright, and today we are going to continue talking about all things fantasy football, and in particular, we're going to be talking about waiver wire pickups for tomorrow's waiver run. We just finished week 4 in the NFL season, and there was a lot that happened. We had some pretty significant injuries that are going to keep some players out. There are some players that are beginning to emerge, and so we have a couple of waiver wire options for you today that I think are very, very good waiver pickups going forward for you in the future. So just jumping into it, we're going to start off with a couple of receivers. And the first one on my list that I think is worth picking up is Chicago Bears second-year receiver Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney he went 5 for 125 on Sunday with Justin Fields. The Bears offense is still really not that great. But Darnell Mooney is continually demanding targets out of Justin Fields and Andy Dalton and whoever else is going to be behind center. But it is actually going to be Andy Dalton this week. And I think as a whole, just because the rookie quarterbacks have been so bad in the NFL so far, Andy Dalton is going to help out Darnell Mooney. He's going to help out Allen Robinson if you have him. But I think Darnell Mooney is really beginning to emerge as a good receiver for this team. This is the third straight week he's led the entire offense in targets. It came in with 5 of those receptions, and he actually looked like he was going to come away with 100-plus yards in the first half. And then the Bears offense really died down, and then he picked it up with another reception and got some more yardage to cross that 100-mark threshold. But overall, Darnell Mooney has looked pretty solid throughout the fantasy season. He's had a couple down games, but again, we are less than halfway through. We're probably not even a third way through yet. So I think Darnell Mooney's a really good stash for you right now if you're looking for a good player, because I think as the season progresses, whether they stay with Andy Dalton or if they move on to Justin Fields, I think Darnell Mooney is going to be a phenomenal player as we see the season progress and as we see him get more comfortable with the quarterbacks and more comfortable with the offense. Next up on my list, I have wide receiver for the New York Jets, and that is Jamison Crowder. This was Crowder's first game of 2021, and like a lot of us probably expected, he came out and was just a target machine. A lot of them came close to the line of scrimmage, but that's his specialty. If you're in a PPR league format, Jamison Crowder is going to be a phenomenal player for you if he can stay healthy, which we know has been a huge concern for Jamison Crowder. He's always taking a prolonged period of time with injuries, but he missed the first 3 weeks of the season due to COVID and to a groin injury. So hopefully he already has gotten his injury bugs out of the way, and we can continue to see him produce at that very, very efficient level. So he came away with 7 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown today. And with Zach Wilson in this offense, it's really kind of a dart throw, just depending on how Zach Wilson's feeling that day. If he's wanting to throw 4 picks before halftime, or if he's wanting to be a first-round draft pick, is just really up to him. But I really do think Jamison Crowder is a worthwhile stash on your bench. I think probably give him another week to see how he does, and then you can throw him in that starting lineup. The biggest question with Jamison Crowder is, how is Elijah Moore? We know Elijah Moore went out with that concussion. He's considered day-to-day. And so just seeing how that progresses with Elijah Moore, both of them on the field, considering they play the same role, is going to be really interesting. But I think for right now, Jamison Crowder is a great pickup for you on your waiver wire if you need some receiver depth or a little more, something a little more solidified. I think he's a great roster add for you as well. And also, he is on the last year of his contract, so they may sign him before the trade deadline because there's a lot of teams that need some good quality receivers. Jacksonville, they just lost DJ Chark for the season, so that puts them with Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault. So just a lot of other teams that could use some receivers as well. But I think Jamison Crowder would be a phenomenal add for you. Next up, really weird saying this, but AJ Green I think would be a good receiver to add, just because he is he's on the best offense in the NFL right now. The Arizona Cardinals are absolutely blazing defenses. The Los Angeles Rams, allegedly one of the best defenses in the league, and honestly still a top 5 team in the league, and Kyler Murray and the Cardinals just absolutely torched them. It just did not feel even close from the rip. Kyler Murray had the game in the palm of his hand the entire time. And AJ Green is just a piece of this offense that I think is going to continue to thrive. My only caveat with Green is he's a little touchdown dependent, but he has, again, led in targets for the Cardinals for the second straight week. He came away with 5 receptions and a long touchdown on Sunday against the Rams. And so he may not be the most dazzling player to put in your starting lineup, but if you need a dart throw, if you need someone that has a pretty high ceiling, man, I think AJ Green's great. He's shown that he is finally got a little bit of juice left in the tank. I don't know if he's got anything after this year or even after next week, but for right now, he's playing really good football, and Kyler Murray's playing incredible football, the MVP frontrunner of the league. So I think AJ Green's definitely worth a stash on your bench. And then if you have an injury or something, I would not mind putting him in my lineup just because we know that the Cardinals are going to be such a good offense, and if Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald and that Los Angeles Rams defense cannot stop them, they don't really know anybody that's going to be able to. So the ball is going to be spread around a lot with the Cardinals, and AJ Green may have a down week, but I think he's going to have a lot of good up weeks as well. Next up, we have Hunter Renfro. Wild stat that you've probably already all seen. Hunter Renfro is one of the only few receivers that has come away with at least 5 receptions in every week of the NFL so far, which is just a mind-boggling stat. This past week, he had 6 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown. And Hunter Renfro is becoming honestly a pretty solid player for fantasy. He's not putting up these Devontae Adams numbers or anything, but he's pretty reliable. He's going to be the check down guy. Derek Carr seems to really like him, especially when they get close to the end zone. Like he wants to find Hunter Renfro. So, and especially after he laid out the Chargers player on the punt return, then how can you not want to put him on your roster? But Hunter Renfro looks really good, especially in PPR formats. He's not going to go up and beat you on a jump ball or anything 30 yards downfield, but he's going to make something happen with the ball in his hands. And I think he's going to continue to be pretty good for fantasy. So he's definitely worth at least a look at putting him on your team if he's going to fit your mold. And the last 2 people I want to talk about. The first one is Curtis Samuel. Not going to spend long on him. The Washington football team just lost Logan Thomas for at least a week. We don't know the severity of this hamstring injury. But Curtis Samuel is going to step in, and he is hopefully fully healthy. And we saw that last year he was very well utilized with the Carolina Panthers, and I think they're going to do the same thing with him here in Washington, especially because he's a familiar coach with Ron Rivera. There's that chemistry built there, and Taylor Heinicke is playing really good. I'll talk about him later when we get to quarterbacks, but I think Curtis Samuel is someone that you can also keep an eye on that would potentially be good on your team. And the last one that I want to talk about is Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney looked really, really good in this game. Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard were both out for the game, and Kadarius Toney was used extremely well. Props to Jason Garrett. Came away with 6 receptions, 78 yards, and 9 targets. I think this Giants offense is starting to continue to click. Daniel Jones is playing the best he's played since he's been in the league. Saquon's getting back healthy. And we've already heard some frustrations out of Toney in the first 3 weeks of the season, that he was frustrated with how the Giants weren't using him well enough in the offense. And I think that now that he's shown that he's really good with the ball in his hands and that he's extremely fast, I think the Giants are going to continue to use him that way. So, again, I'm really high on Kadarius Toney. I think that they're going to continue to use him well. Kenny Golladay as well is helping him out. He's being able to stretch down the field a little bit. I think he has the most like midfield between like 15 and 30 yards as far as targets go in that range. So he's able to stretch it out a little more, and Toney's going to be able to sit underneath and catch those balls and just make a play happen. Very similar to Tyreek Hill. Not saying he's going to be Tyreek Hill, but I think he's going to be a really exciting player that probably has one of the highest ceilings out of all these receivers. Moving on to running back, we've got honestly, I think a lot of good running backs that we can look to put on our benches over the next weeks. The biggest one, notably, is Damien Williams for the Chicago Bears. David Montgomery went down with not official yet, but it's looking like it's just an MCL sprain, probably a grade 2. And so it's going to put him out 4 to 5 weeks. And the same thing happened with Nick Chubb last year, and I think they actually held him out 6 weeks. And so in the time being, Damien Williams came in, had 8 for 55 on the ground and a touchdown, and then 2 for 15 through the air. And so Damien Williams is, if you need a running back, honestly, if you don't even need a running back, he's probably he's probably a priority numero uno for everybody, hopefully, because he's going to get a monster target load, just because he's proven time and time again that he's capable. We can probably expect him not to be as good as David Montgomery has been, but I think he's definitely a high-end RB2. Like, he's going to get a ton of volume work, especially with how skittish this passing offense of the Bears has been. I think Damien Williams is going to do really, really well in the time that David Montgomery is absent. But we can expect that he is just a rental. After that 4 to 5 period, week period is up, he's probably just going to go back to your bench, maybe just cut him. But for right now, just pick him up, enjoy the 4 to 5 weeks with him, and then cross that bridge with David Montgomery when you get there. Next running back I want to talk about is Latavius Murray. The Ravens' backfield since the preseason has just been a conundrum, with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill all going down, and then the emergence of this young Tyson Williams, who looked really, really good in week 1, was just a healthy scratch in this past week. Very, very bizarre. Personally, I don't really like putting my eggs in any basket of Ravens running backs. But if you want like a 0 running back strat and you need someone that you think is going to be able to produce, I think Latavius Murray has as good a chance as anyone to get in the end zone every week, just because of the nature of how the Ravens play. They love to run the ball a lot. I mean, they just have 43 straight games of over 100 rushing yards, which is ridiculous. So Latavius Murray is going to see volume. He had 18 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown this past week. He still looks good. They brought in Lev Bell. Everybody was freaking out about Lev Bell because they still remember the 1 year that he was just a fantasy nut job, and he's washed. Came in for like four carries for 11 yards. Absolutely terrible. Get him off the team. Just not looking good. So Latavius Murray, I think, is going to be the one on this team, for whatever that means, because Lamar Jackson's obviously going to continue to be the running back 1 just because of how well he runs. But I think Latavius Murray still has a lot of upside if you're looking for just something to catch you by. Like if you have 3 or 4 stud wide receivers that you're running in your receiver in your flex spot, and you just need someone to pair with a Saquon or a Joe Mixon or someone along that caliber, then Latavius Murray is probably going to get you about 8 to 12 points every week consistently. But if you're looking for that home run play, he's definitely not someone you want to look for. Next up, we have Samaje Perine. A little skittish on him if you are in a fab league where you have to prioritize money and budgeting and stuff. I probably wouldn't throw in a lot on him unless you're the Joe Mixon owner. It's tough because Joe Mixon could be out a week, or we could see another situation to last year where he is out the rest of the season and we just don't know. And Samaje Perine comes in for 15, 20 points a game. So he is very scary to me. I don't know if I would want to put a whole lot of money on him, again, unless I'm the Joe Mixon owner. So that's just something to monitor. Maybe continue to watch over that and see how that develops. And last two I want to talk about for the running backs is Seattle running back Alex Collins and Kansas City running back Darrell Williams. I think both of these players are handcuffs for the most part. Alex Collins for sure. Speaking from the heart as a Chris Carson owner in multiple leagues, having Alex Collins on my bench and losing most of those leagues with Alex Collins on my bench was incredibly sad. Chris Carson, we know, has a history with injuries. He's already kind of been dealing with a hamstring injury as well. And so Alex Collins, I think, has to be on your bench because we've seen that he is explosive. He does really, really well with the ball in his hands. And Pete Carroll seems to like him. He was really impressive in preseason. So Alex Collins needs to be on your bench, especially if you're the Chris Carson owner. I can't imagine that a lot of other people would want to go after him because I still think Chris Carson has that clear-cut like running back 1 in the backfield. So Alex Collins is someone you need to monitor for sure. And lastly, with Darrell Williams, I think the same thing can be said with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. CEH has turned it around the past 2 games on the ground, but it's really weird because we'd just be watching, and sometimes Clyde would get full drives, and then they get to the goal line, and like, all right, Clyde's done, and now Darrell Williams is going to get a few runs. He got a touchdown, 42 yards, 2 receptions this past week. So Darrell Williams is honestly a guy that you can probably stick in your flex if you're absolutely desperate and hope for the best because Andy Reid likes him. They like using him around the goal line. He is a bigger back, much bigger than Clyde. A little more reliable to get in the goal or get into the end zone on the goal line. So Darrell Williams, a stash if you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Maybe if you're desperate at running back or flex, maybe look at him as well. Moving on to tight ends. 3 tight ends we really want to look at today as far as waivers go. The first one is Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, for the past 2 years, people have been singing his praises, and they have just not followed through with that yet. But it seems with Jacoby Brissett and this year in the league, Mike Gesicki is really starting to turn things around. 5 for 57 and a touchdown. He is a phenomenal athlete. Never been a question of that. It's just been a matter of who can connect with him. We thought Tua was going to be that answer. Tua has not been the answer at all. We thought Ryan Fitzpatrick was going to be that answer. Fitzpatrick was not that answer, but it looks like Jacoby Brissett may finally be giving the ball to Mike Gesicki how he should be. Mike Gesicki, with with 5 receptions, 57 yards, and a touchdown this past week. Second straight week as a top 10 tight end. And I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. So if you need a tight end, I would definitely go out and try and get Mike Gesicki. And even like if you have one of those top tight ends like a TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, or George Kittle, maybe consider going to get Mike Gesicki off the waivers and packaging those top end tight ends up and trying to get a good running back or a good receiver depending on what your team needs. Because I really do think Gesicki is going to continue this trend of being very valuable, especially in a world where tight ends are so sparse. Next tight end I have on the list is Dawson Knox from the Buffalo Bills. And Dawson Knox is fairly touchdown dependent. He's found the end zone 3 times in the past 2 weeks, but he is on one of the best offenses in football with Josh Allen at the helm with the quarterback position. And honestly, if you can get a piece of this Bills offense, I do not blame you, because there's going to be a lot of points scored. There's going to be a lot of yards acquired if you're on the offensive side of this team. So getting Dawson Knox, throwing him in your lineup, I think he has a lower floor than some of the other tight ends, but I do think his ceiling is really, really high. As we saw this past week, he got 2 great touchdowns, and Josh Allen really, really likes him. He's got a really good chemistry going with him. So I think Dawson Knox is a really good waiver pickup if you've been struggling with a Jonnu Smith or a Hunter Henry, or if some of these other tight ends have not really panned out for you. And last tight end I want to talk about is Dalton Shultz from the Dallas Cowboys. And coming into the season, even myself personally, I was really struggling with who's going to be the tight end one in the situation. Was it going to be Blake Jarwin or Dalton Schultz? Jarwin suffered that in season-ending ACL tear last year, and so I was wondering if he's going to come back in and take that role. But it really has looked like Dalton Schultz is emerging as the tight end one this year with his second straight week of 5+ receptions, 6 receptions, 58 yards, and a touchdown. And the Cowboys have honestly been just really good about scheming for these tight ends. They get down to the goal line. Dak is not running like he used to, which is good, because I think for him especially, he's not having to rely on his legs as much, but they are very useful if he needs them. And so Dalton Schultz is being very heavily utilized in the red zone here. He's being very heavily utilized really throughout the entirety of the game. And so I think he's a great play. He's always got that touchdown potential going into the game. The Cowboys are a phenomenal offense, and just like Dawson Knox, getting a piece of this offense, you feel really, really comfortable. Because actually, I saw a stat yesterday that in the past 8 games that the Cowboys have had Dak Prescott at quarterback, they have scored on average 33 points, which is a ton in the NFL. And so for Dalton Schultz to be a piece of this offense that's going to be scoring 33 points a game, respectively, I think he's a great tight end, great pass catcher to put on your team. And last but not least, going to move down to quarterbacks. And man, there's a lot of quarterbacks that have really, really surprised me this year. First one I want to talk about that I think you should stash if you need a quarterback or if you have the availability to, is Trey Lance, rookie quarterback from San Francisco. And everybody was extremely high on Trey Lance coming into the season. He was taken as a first-round pick by the 49ers, and so everybody was just kind of like, all right, when is Jimmy G getting the boot? When are they going to trade him? And Jimmy G has held on to a starting spot for 4 weeks, but he went out with a calf strain, which I think they've actually changed now to a calf contusion. So this could be a window for Trey Lance to go out and really perform well. Honestly, this past week, Trey Lance, his numbers are great. He had like 22 fantasy points on the week. But a lot of that was thanks to a huge blown coverage touchdown by Deebo Samuel. But we did see a lot of good things from Trey Lance. He used his legs very well, 7 for 41 on the ground. He threw for 2 touchdowns and 157 yards. So I think that the room for growth for Trey Lance is here. I think that the way that he's going to be utilized, very similar to Kyler or Russell Wilson, it's there. The opportunity is there. So he has maybe a week. Jimmy G may start. But if Jimmy G doesn't start, then I think having Trey Lance on your bench and just kind of seeing what he does could be very, very valuable. But again, I probably would not get your hopes too high up because rookie quarterbacks have just not been super efficient this year. They've struggled quite a bit. But nevertheless, moving on, we have Sam Darnold. Just playing phenomenal football right now. He gets out of Adam Gase, he gets out of New York, and he just continues to ball out. He's led the Panthers 3-1 to start the season. Sam Darnold 26 for 39 through the air this past Sunday for 301 yards and 2 touchdowns in the air. And then most surprisingly, 35 yards on the ground for 2 touchdowns. Obviously, you cannot expect Sam Darnold to get 2 touchdowns on the ground every week, but he is one of those quarterbacks to where he's not going to be a run-first quarterback, but he has the opportunity and the ability to run if the play breaks down. He's not a Ben Roethlisberger where he's tripping over his own feet. He's not a Tom Brady where he's just going to check it down all the time. He has the ability to run, and that's what makes him a very valuable quarterback, and especially with Christian McCaffrey being out, he does not have that super safe safety valve of the running back just to throw the ball down to. So Sam Darnold, if you need if you need a quarterback in a pinch, bye weeks are coming up, he's one that I would definitely be looking at. Next up, we have Taylor Heinicke from the Washington football team, who I have been very impressed with. Ever since that he played against Tom Brady and the Bucs in the playoffs last year, I was hoping for Taylor Heinicke to take the starting job. And unfortunately, it came at the expense of Ryan Fitzpatrick's health. But Taylor Heinicke's looked really good. He's one of those players that, don't want to say he's matchup proof, but he is going to go out and he's going to make plays against good defenses. I don't think it's a matter of if the defense is too good or if the defense is too oppressive towards him. He's going to go out and he's going to find his wide receiver one. He's going to find Terry McLaurin. He's going to find these open plays. Again, he's in that range of quarterbacks that are mobile but are not going to look to run first, so he can run for a few yards. He had 43 yards on the ground. So Taylor Heinicke looks really, really, really good. I think the biggest question is if the offense is going to be able to keep up, because it looks like the way Ron Rivera wants to run this offense is if the game's really, really competitive, they're going to let Taylor Heinicke ball out. But if the offense is not super competitive that they're playing against and they're just kind of running away with it, they're just going to keep handing the ball off to Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, whoever's in the game, and they're just going to continue to chunk away yards on the ground. So Taylor Heinicke is a really interesting ad for me. I think he's going to be probably be a top 15 fantasy quarterback for the rest of the season with his opportunities to have top 12 moments as the year progresses. But I think he's a very interesting ad to say the least. And last quarterback and last player we're going to be talking about today is Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. This is officially, I think, the breakout year for Daniel Jones. He's had 3 really solid games now throughout the fantasy season. This past Sunday, going to overtime with New Orleans, which I don't think anybody expected to happen. 28 for 40 through the air for 402 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is just mind-blowing to me against a New Orleans defense that is so solid. I think that he's just playing really well. And again, he is one of those quarterbacks that if he has to, he can run for 20, 30, 40 yards if need to, or if need be. I think a lot of that is taken back now that Saquon looks to be really healthy again, considering that he has had the least rushing yards this past week as he has had all season. But nevertheless, I think Daniel Jones is honestly a startable quarterback week in and week out. I think the emergence of Kadarius Toney is really helping him because previously just working with Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard and Kenny Golladay, none of these guys are like game-changing receivers. Kenny Golladay, he's been good. He's kind of tapering off just to look like an average wide receiver. Sterling Shepard, he's not bad in the slot, but he's injury prone. Darius Slayton had his one half season of glory. But Kadarius Toney really looks to be a game changer, and I kind of made it an equivalence to Tyreek Hill earlier. Obviously, I don't think he's Tyreek Hill, but I think that helps out Daniel Jones a lot to know that, he can dump it off in the flat to someone, and that guy can go make a play with it. Same thing for Saquon and his giant legs. I just think that this team is really shaping up to be a sneaky offense in the NFL. All right, and that's going to do it for our waiver show today. Don't be scared to use your fab. Don't be scared to use your first waiver priority on any of these players. I think that they're very valuable. If you're 1-3, 0-4, then these players can really help you get yourself out of a rut. If you're 3-1, 4-0, add these players, block them off from the league, use them as trade bait. Do something like that. That's going to help give you an upper hand, give you an edge in your league. But that's all we have for today. Best of luck going into this next week 5 of the NFL season, and we will see you next week.